Ott, thank you for taking the time to jump on a call. I know you've been traveling and you've got a particularly busy schedule, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
It's my pleasure.
So you're the Estonian government's chief data officer.
Exactly.
What does that actually involve?
So I'm responsible for the government's policy making and strategic coordination of everything related to data and AI. So it's really up to me and my team to support Estonian government in terms of where we are heading related to AI, data governance, data sharing, what is the role of citizens and businesses in the whole ecosystem, and how government itself can really utilize data for better data-driven decision making, how we can be data-driven as a whole. So we are working on a policy side, supporting agencies, ministries, and also regulation.
So you mentioned there also regulation. Regulation is obviously something that a lot of people are concerned about right now with regards to the development of AI and what that might mean for society and their businesses. How involved are you in the process of writing policy for Estonia? And as a follow-up, how much are you working with your partners around Europe?
So it's a day-to-day job. And so we are right now finalizing our 2030 AI and data strategy. So AI is a key part. When I joined the government 5 years ago, actually my first kind of initiative was to start developing AI strategy for Estonian government. So it has been really close to my heart. And back then, we also considered whether AI should have a legal entity status. So you have individuals, you have businesses, and AI would be responsible for itself. So over the course of the 5 years, we've been heavily thinking in terms of what needs to be done. And we decided to take an approach that we would benefit and Europe as a whole if we have a holistic AI regulation. And this is AI Act. Throughout the process itself, I've been rather skeptical and concerned in terms of how we are approaching AI in Europe. Is it really about regulation, or we are supporting the ecosystem itself as well? Because if we put new restrictions on companies, on public sector, the cost of development gets higher and higher. And if it gets higher, less we will do. And Europe is already lagging behind on many emergent technologies and how we are actually utilizing ICT. So I'm concerned whether we are doing enough to support the ecosystem itself, or it is really rather about regulation and putting up new requirements.
How does the EU stay competitive, or how does a country like Estonia stay competitive and ensure that the competition is healthy, allowing startups, businesses to thrive within the world that we're beginning to see emerge?
So instead of regulation, we should put a lot more emphasis on training and upskilling the people that do live in Europe, that we have the specialists required, that in the business itself, our companies that we have data available, digitalization rate itself needs to be much higher, but also at the same time providing practical, both financial and non-financial support to companies. So from the ideation to development to going to the market, there needs to be mechanism to support that ecosystem, also financial instruments. But instead, we have decided that in various areas, we are going to outline that some concrete use cases areas are considered high risk, although there is no practical argumentation why we should do that, or if there is a kind of a concrete risk involved. For instance, education. Is education high risk just for the sake of it because it is education? Or we already know that there are some concrete examples where something has gone way wrong. So instead of just starting to regulate the areas where AI itself has not been implemented in Europe, we should start thinking in terms of let's get the experience, learn from that. And from what we have learned, we can regulate if there's a necessity. Also, if we think in terms of where is right now Europe and many other countries, then most companies are SMEs. However, for SMEs, they don't have the financial they don't have the financials, they don't have the skills. What are they going to do when it comes to AI? Europe has set out that all member states, there should be a 75% adoption of AI in the private sector. Imagine 75%. In many countries, we have 90 plus, sometimes 99% of all companies are SMEs. So it's really up to the government to support via developing open source core tools, services that private sector can in the end implement, use, because it is impossible for that large scale development to be happening across all small and medium sized companies. So we need to rethink what we are doing in Europe. And instead, we are focusing really strongly right now on the regulation.
If we are aiming for 70% adoption of AI within SMEs, that would seem to suggest a kind of a light touch approach to regulation that puts a lot of emphasis back on self-regulation and on those businesses to adopt AI as they see fit. But a lot of organizations are holding back because they aren't confident that regulation is going to work. They're not confident it's going to be fit for purpose. How do you give them the confidence to push ahead with deployments and utilize this technology if they're not confident? Because we're not going to ever reach that 70% if that's the case.
It's actually even larger, 75% of all companies. And indeed, that's the situation that we are right now in. So from one end, we have an overarching ambition, 75% of companies utilizing AI. But at the same time, you have growing regulatory burden that is going to affect everyone in the ecosystem itself. So our approach has been that we are going to support and provide active support in terms of AI Act itself, making it understandable, as easy as possible to follow all the regulations. So to take that burden off the companies themselves. The ecosystem is growingly getting more complex. So for instance, in Europe, we have Data Governance Act, we have Data Act, we have Open Data and Public Information Act, we have DSA, now we have AI Act, and there are more to come. So how are you actually going to orient on all of those regulatory burdens, from data management to data utilization, data processing, cloud service providers? There is a lot to handle. And at the same time, we want companies to innovate and invest. But with each regulatory burden, it's getting more and more complex. And it is in the end much more efficient to provide those kind of support to organizations, also ensuring that if member states or countries are following through, how we can make it as simple as possible for everyone to understand what they need to do. In those circumstances, these are the opportunities. Also setting up technical and regulatory sandboxes. So you have the regulation, but also enabling to test out. And I truly believe that Estonia can be a sandbox, a test bed for testing out new technologies. If it works, then Europe is the market to go to. But at the same time, ensuring that what companies are doing are human-centric, they are trustworthy, and at the same time, what we are doing is transparent as well. So sharing what we are learning during the process itself. When we think in terms of the regulation itself, then I truly believe that much what we have stated can be achieved rather from a practical, from the applied approach, much easier. So for instance, right now we have different principles. And this is one of the reasons I don't see that there is anything changing or happening globally. Everyone are developing their own principles, UNESCO, United Nations. Then we have European Commission, European Council. Everyone has their own principles. But at the same time, how are you going to implement or follow through? In Estonia, we have taken the practical approach. So let's do what really counts. When we talk about human kind of trust, then transparency of how you are actually processing personal data is a core. For this, we have developed a data tracker. You go to the government portal, you see how the government is actually processing your personal data. Similarly, I see that this approach should kind of go to private sector as well. If you're actually processing someone's data, let's take Meta or Google, then be transparent. How are you utilizing my personal data that I have kind of entrusted to you as a company while using your services? This is a must. Similarly, empowering people to decide themselves how and which stakeholders can actually process their personal data. And with all this in mind, we need to understand also that people need to have the basic data literacy because the world is getting more and more data and AI kind of powered. So people need to have the basic understanding. What are their rights? How technology itself functions. So these are the key aspects that we need to start from elementary on.
You describe Estonia as a sandbox, and that's interesting. I was at the ambassador's residence for Estonia a couple of weeks ago for an Accelerate Estonia event.
Mm-hmm.
Every individual nation is trying to position themselves in a competitive environment where they're attracting business. And Estonia is no different. Estonia is positioning itself as a country where there is less red tape, and therefore if you're a British startup, come over to Estonia. You can innovate, you can move fast. It's a great place to grow and then take your learnings to other markets. Where AI is concerned, collaboration amongst member states of the EU, but more broadly the international community, is really important. Do you see there being any conflict between countries adopting slightly different approaches to regulation, but also that needs to collaborate and be friendly whilst also competitive?
Mm-hmm. I think from the AI Act, we have solved that there is less market fragmentation. So an unified European market, which with its own principles is definitely going to support kind of cross-border collaboration as well. In the end, we are after the same thing, European principles put into practice. Now, the question is, how are you going to put those principles in practice and what type of a support mechanism do you actually have and how much additional red tape does it involve within each member state itself? So from that perspective, I see Estonia is well positioned in terms of our high digitalization, close access to also Lumi HPC, for instance. So there is a potential in terms of the infrastructure, skills, but also the support that we are offering. So I don't see any kind of why it wouldn't work. What is important also is that our approach from day one is actually being collaborative and open, kind of open source, open development. So I truly believe that everyone should benefit from data, from AI. So when one member state or companies develop anything, if possible, make it open source so others can benefit as well. We have taken that approach. It pays off. I hope others will follow.
When you write policy and regulation, who are you writing for?
In the end, for citizens and companies in Estonia. It's not for the sake of the government. So behind everything, it's the people that live in Estonia, that they have the best life possible, that we make their life easier, we support our businesses. That's what in the end matters. Government is not operating for the sake of government. Of course, as part of that, we need to improve our decision making as well, that we make kind of calculated, wise decisions, not based on gut feeling, but it needs to be balanced. And just to bring you an example, if you look at our data and AI strategy that we are working right now, then efficiency is a key part. Similarly, actually building people's basic data literacy to 80% of the whole Estonian population. Or when we are talking about data tracker or consent service, then what we are actually after is how much citizens and companies are using, not how many private government organizations have implemented. We are in the end after the end user, and the focus needs to be on those who will in the end benefit. The government is never kind of the end product itself. The end user are people from the streets. And I see that from the government perspective, especially on the central government level, this is a global problem. We have lost touch with people. On the local government level, it's a little bit better.
If people are going to have the confidence to challenge their organizations, to invest in them, how can what you're doing play a role and giving them the powers that are strong enough to be able to challenge organizations to say, no, invest in me, invest in skills, and make sure that people really are at the forefront of their organization's mind?
I think in the end, it will create the competitive advantage because you are building trust, you have a culture behind. So there's a community, a mindset, how things should be, how you are actually processing data. If users are trusting a private sector or a government in terms of how they are handling their data, it's only good. Demanding that we don't like our data to be sold to third parties, that's a normal part. Or if you are providing someone a £10 or €10 voucher for their health data, that's insane if people don't understand what is the risk. Unfortunately, this is a common thing. So kind of an universal understanding of the rights, but also opportunities, it will make a better and I think a fair playground for everyone who wants to operate. So giving people the opportunity to share their private or governmental data with other organizations will level the playground. You are no longer just kind of stuck with one service provider that you decided to use 10 years ago. It's much easier to make the change if someone has a competitive or better service offering. So it will definitely change the way we are kind of operating today, hopefully for the best.
Do technology leaders within the SMEs that we're talking about, within those organizations, understand the role that they have to play in achieving regulation that works for everyone?
Unfortunately, I think right now, due to the complexity and how things have worked, I think SMEs, if we talk in general, don't understand what is coming. And I think that's kind of a key part. It's similar to GDPR. Everyone understood that something is going to happen. Everyone were a little bit cautious, but now with the AI, it's the similar. Companies are waiting from the government a clear message. This is what you need to do. Expecting everyone to understand the scope. Unfortunately, I don't see that this is the case. And it's at the same time true as well. If you have 5, 10 people in a company, SMEs, sometimes more, sometimes less, then thinking from an AI Act perspective, I think it's too much to ask. Especially as, for instance, in Estonia, we have less than 4% of private sector today who are implementing AI. On an EU level, it's roughly less than 10%. So you have 10 less percent companies implementing AI. Now to expect that they are extremely interested and they are keeping a tap on what is happening with regulatory landscape, that's too much to ask. There are bigger problems.
I know this is an incredibly complex issue, and trying to boil it down to one point here is perhaps naive, but I'm going to ask anyway. There are two competing visions of the future where AI is concerned. You have people who are worried about the impact on society and existential threats, and then you've got people who are very hopeful about the opportunity that it could unlock for people. What do you think the tipping point in us steering down the right path might be? What one choice do you think we could make with regards to regulation, with regards to getting the environment right, that can make a really big impact in getting this right?
So I'm, as you know, I'm pro AI in terms of the potential it can give for the society itself. I think the tipping point is that if we start to also trust what we are actually doing. So instead of having this kind of glasses on that AI is bad, which is right now kind of a really growing sentiment in terms of these are kind of a couple of major players. Everyone else are lagging. We need to control, we need to regulate. But let's enable the ecosystem. Let's start to think how we can utilize AI to build a better future. How we can really build an, I don't know, AI virtual assistant for every citizen. How we can support medicine. Let's put in resources to actually change the way we are kind of operating on day-to-day basis. So this is a key aspect. And also we need to understand that with every AI, you need to have the home base kind of in order. So data governance, how we are handling data from the beginning. We cannot jump to AI if we have not even digitized how we are operating today. So kind of a robust data governance, that's a must. And if we have that in place, then we can start working on AI.
Ott, thank you so much for your time today. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.